architecture of the ray. The following script is based upon the book titled Opticks, authored by Isaac Newton and first published in the year 1704. Chapter 1. The Rupture of the Void. A single circular aperture, measuring 1/3 of an inch, pierces the heavy wooden shutter of the completely darkened chamber. Through this deliberate incision flows a solitary beam of solar radiation, cutting a straight and pellucid path through the void. Microscopic dust particles drift silently through the intense column of light, illuminated briefly before falling back into the black. The architecture of this isolated space dictates absolute atmospheric stillness, preserving the exact trajectory of the descending ray. This homogeneal light propagates relentlessly forward, carrying the immense energetic pressure of the sun directly into the cold room. Before the solar beam can complete its natural transit and strike the distant wall, a dense object is placed directly in its pathway. A perfectly polished triangular prism of solid glass intercepts the descending radiation exactly at the border of the initial aperture. The transparent crystalline structure of this geometric obstacle forces a sudden and catastrophic alteration upon the straight incident ray. Upon striking the first planar boundary of the glass, the seemingly simple white light suffers an immediate and profound internal rupture. The uniform beam does not simply pass through the denser medium, nor does it bend as a single cohesive unit of homogeneal illumination. Instead, the fundamental property of refrangibility manifests instantly, tearing the unified solar radiation into a heterogeneous spectrum. Various corpuscular components within the original ray react differently to the sudden increase in optical density provided by the prism. Those specific particles possessing the greatest refrangibility are forced into the sharpest angle of deviation from their original line. These highly refrangible elements correspond strictly to the production of the deepest violet and indigo hues upon reaching the far wall. This unequal bending at the precise moment of incidence shatters the mathematical illusion of the pure, unbroken white beam of sunlight. As the divergent corpuscles traverse the interior crystalline matrix of the prism, their physical separation grows increasingly absolute. The rays emerge from the second polished surface, suffering another distinct refraction that amplifies their angular divergence further. They travel across the 18 feet of empty darkness, spreading wider and wider apart until they finally collide with the vertical plane. The resulting projection is not the expected circular point of illumination, but an elongated and perfectly straight rectangular spectrum. This vivid oblong image measures 10¼ inches in vertical length, maintaining a strict horizontal width of exactly 2 inches. The lateral edges of the projected shape remain parallel and defined, while the upper and and lower boundaries fade into semicircular ends. 5 times longer than it is broad, this spectacular distortion defies all previously accepted laws of regular and uniform optical behavior. The unequal distribution of refracted light provides undeniable mechanical proof that the original ray was heavily compounded from its birth. Each separate color band occupying a specific geometric coordinate on the wall represents a unique class of fundamentally immutable matter. The deepest red forms the lowest section of the illuminated column, consisting of particles that proved least susceptible to the glass. Above this crimson foundation rests a brilliant layer of orange, followed directly by intense bands of yellow and vibrant, pure green. The upper half of the linear projection is dominated by the highly deflected corpuscles of pellucid blue, dark indigo, and terminal violet. No individual section of this extended vertical rainbow can be further divided or altered by passing it through another glass aperture. This unyielding constancy proves that the phenomenon of color is not a superficial modification artificially imposed by the prism's edge. Instead, every distinct hue observed upon the dark wall is an original and connate property residing deep within the fabric of the light. The transparent wedge does not manufacture the brilliant spectrum, but merely untangles an already dense and complex physical knot of rays. The solitary beam of white sunshine entering the shutter was never a simple entity, but a chaotic rush of heterogeneous active principles. By subjecting this chaotic stream to precise angular interference, the darkened chamber effectively sorts the invisible particles by mass. The revelation contained within this stretched band of luminescence profoundly reorganizes the basic understanding of the physical universe. The vast and supposedly uniform emptiness of the daylight is actually crowded with an infinite multitude of distinct and varying corpuscles. Color does not reside in the painted surfaces of objects, nor is it a fleeting and ethereal modification caused by the boundary of shadows. It is a permanent and mathematical force carried through the vacuum, waiting only for a crystalline edge to unbind its hidden complexities. The architecture of the solar ray is finally laid bare upon the plaster, separated into its immutable and strictly proportional components. Purity is nothing more than the perfect mixture of infinite diversity, traveling rapidly across the silent and unimaginably cold dark void. White light is the absolute sum of all visible physical realities, perfectly balanced and perpetually falling in total mathematical silence. Chapter 2. The Law of the Refracted Path. A heavy wooden board intercepts the wide spectrum of light in the silent chamber, halting its scattered progression. A single, precise aperture allows one isolated beam of color to pass through the solid barrier into the dark. This solitary ray travels toward a second board, which holds another small opening to refine the lonely beam, this second barrier, another glass prism stands ready to receive the purified fragment of illumination. The structure defines the experimentum crucis, an unyielding trial designed to test the nature of the pure ray. The second prism intercepts the isolated ray, bending the beam once more against the geometry of the cold glass. However, this subsequent refraction entirely fails to change the fundamental color of the isolated beam of light. The pure red ray emerges from the second prism without adopting any new modifications or shifting its deep hue. The isolated blue ray retains its exact vivid characteristic, remaining untouched by the passage through the glass. This singular phenomenon proves that homogeneal light is strictly immutable, defying any further transformation. The refrangibility of the simple ray is a constant property, completely unaffected by the second glass barrier. The measurement of the signs of incidence and refraction reveals an absolute, unwavering ratio for the material. For the solid glass prism, this crucial ratio is exactly established as 20 to 31 for every pure ray. The constant proportion creates a strict geometric law for each individual color within the separated spectrum. Every distinct degree of refrangibility corresponds perfectly to a specific, unchangeable hue in the projection. The dark void of the chamber serves as a silent stage for these undeniable mathematical constants to unfold clearly. There is no subjective interpretation in the quiet room. The numbers exist independently of any human observation. The boundaries between the projected colors are meticulously measured and mapped against a rigid physical scale. The mathematical division of the luminous spectrum directly corresponds to the exact intervals of a musical chord. The physics of radiating light are inextricably linked to the unseen harmony of sound vibrating through the air. The geometry of the universe applies equally to the pellucid rays of the sun and the resonating strings of a lute. The second prism utterly fails to stain the incoming ray with any new shadow or varying degree of refrangibility. The properties of the separated corpuscular light remain completely fixed throughout the duration of the passage. No external force within the transparent glass possesses the power to alter the fundamental nature of the element. The visual spectrum is not a creation of the prism, but a hidden reality extracted directly from the white beam. The rubrific rays maintain their exact angles of incidence and reflection, regardless of the obstacle in their path. The less refrangible particles of red continue their predetermined trajectory with absolute mathematical precision. The more refrangible blue particles bend at their own designated angle, forever trapped by their specific nature. Different refrangibility forces the various colors to be turned out of their way at vastly different set angles. The natural world operates upon an unseen grid of immutable laws that dictate the behavior of every single particle. The vibrant colors perceived in the world are eternal mathematical constants, woven directly into the cosmic fabric. These constants exist in absolute perfection before they ever cross the infinite void to reach the human sensorium. The pure, homogeneal light cannot be broken down any further by the transparent apparatus of the darkened chamber. Each simple ray acts as an indestructible foundational block of the physical universe, resisting all modifications. The optical phenomenon captured upon the wall is merely a shadow of the rigorous geometric laws governing the void. The careful positioning of the small wooden apertures isolates the fundamental truth of the divided solar spectrum. The isolation strips away the complexity of the white beam, revealing the stark simplicity of the individual ray. The sharp, unbroken projection establishes a reality where physical light and pure mathematics are completely one. The unwavering straight line of the separated beam cuts through the dusty air, a physical manifestation of an equation. The angle of inflection dictates that every corpuscular strike upon the wall lands exactly where nature demands it. There is no random distribution of light. The universe constructs the beautiful spectrum through absolute necessity. The unyielding logic of the two boards and the second prism dismantles any illusion of a flexible, shifting reality. The immutable nature of the primary colors stands as a testament to the rigid, mechanical foundation of all existence. The final, isolated red dot on the furthest wall shines as a pure, mathematical absolute in the encompassing darkness. Chapter 3: The Anatomy of Whiteness. The isolated spectrum waits within the darkened room, ready for the mechanical synthesis of the many into the one. A device carved with precise, wooden teeth moves rapidly through the vibrant spectrum to intercept the colors. The solid teeth eclipse the distinct rays in quick succession until the eye can no longer distinguish them. This rapid succession of individual colors in the sensorium produces the absolute, undeniable sensation of white. Such an operation proves that perfect whiteness is a dissimilar mixture of all colors existing simultaneously. A glass convex lens is strategically used to converge the diverging colored rays back into a singular, sharp point. The focused convergence of these disparate beams flawlessly restores the original, unblemished white beam of light. This establishes a microstory of physical reconstruction, moving from the broken spectrum back to the unified beam. The factual exploration focuses heavily on the mechanical blending of light, the deliberate synthesis of corpuscles. Every observation mirrors the prior analysis, demonstrating the reversible nature of the synthesis and the analysis. The analysis of natural bodies reveals new truths about how solid matter interacts with the heterogeneous light. A powder of minium appears red solely because it reflects the rubrific rays much more copiously than any others. The solid material is entirely responsible for stifling the remaining, differently colored rays within its deep pores. Color does not reside in the object, but is an original, connate property of the specific rays reflecting outward. The diverse refrangibility of these particles dictates how they scatter when striking the rough surfaces of the world. These physical strikes create a state of severe agitation in the sensorium, mimicking the very essence of the world. The conclusive realization points directly to the entirely mechanical nature of vision itself within the human body. Whiteness is merely a state of chaotic agitation in the sensorium, a composite effect of 1,000 distinct strikes. The mind perceives simplicity, constructing a unified white light from a storm of distinct corpuscular strikes. The heavy wooden comb device continues its relentless motion, slicing through the projected bands of color with precision. Each individual tooth of the instrument acts as a temporary barrier, blocking a specific fraction of the heterogeneous light. As the speed of the intercepting teeth increases, the eye loses the ability to track the isolated, homogeneal flashes. The limits of human perception become apparent as the distinct chromatic signals blur into a single, continuous stream. It becomes mathematically evident that white is not an absence of color, but the overwhelming presence of every single hue. The corpuscles of red, yellow, green, blue, and violet arrive at the retina in such a dense and disorganized barrage. The sensory apparatus cannot separate the strikes, forcing the internal mind to register the chaos as a pure, blank light. The introduction of the biconvex glass lens provides another irrefutable demonstration of this fundamental optical law. Positioned precisely in the path of the divergent spectrum, the curved glass begins to bend the separated rays inward. The varying degrees of refrangibility ensure that each color is refracted by the exact amount necessary to reunite them. At the designated focal point of the lens, the entire spectrum crashes together, obliterating the individual colors completely. The resulting spot of light on the parchment is brilliant white, displaying no trace of the vibrant hues that form its core. Intercepting the converging rays before they reach the focal point reveals a blurred, partially mixed chromatic ring. Moving the parchment beyond the exact focal point allows the rays to cross and diverge once more, inverting the color order. Only at the precise mathematical center of intersection does the absolute synthesis occur, masking the underlying complexity. This mechanical synthesis is mirrored in the natural world, where solid objects act as selective filters for the sunlight. The structural pores of a leaf or a stone determine which specific corpuscles of light are absorbed and which are repelled. The vivid redness of the minium powder is merely the physical rejection of the least refrangible rays back into the void. The remaining rays of green, blue, and violet plunge deep into the microscopic cavities of the pigment and are extinguished. The observable universe is therefore painted not by inherent stains, but by the relentless geometry of corpuscular reflection. Every visible object in the chamber is constantly sorting and scattering the heterogeneous mixture that strikes its surface. The act of seeing is revealed to be a violent, unceasing bombardment of active principles upon the fragile human sensorium. The transparent illusion of the simple ray is definitively shattered, replaced by an intricate clockwork of flying particles. The purity of white light is exposed as the ultimate deception, hiding the vast, heterogeneous reality of the physical cosmos. Whiteness is the sum of visible forces, a turbulent equilibrium achieved through the rapid collision of distinct elements. Chapter 4. The Ghost in the Glass. Two immense surfaces of polished glass converge within the absolute darkness of the isolated and highly controlled chamber. A perfectly plain object is forcefully pressed against a distinctly spherical lens to establish a singular point of contact. This immense physical pressure creates a microscopic thin plate of air trapped tightly between the two heavy glass boundaries. The analytical focus immediately shifts downward toward the microscopic boundary to observe a scale of nanometric precision. Atmospheric air slowly creeps into the invisible intervals between the compressed lenses as physical pressure is applied. A remarkable series of concentric and highly iridescent circles suddenly begins to appear around the central point of contact. The gradual creeping of air across the microscopic gap facilitates the direct and observable birth of these luminous rings. These emerging rings constantly alternate between bands of vivid spectral color and regions of total and absolute darkness. The mysterious transition from profound brightness to utter shadow corresponds exactly to measurable intervals of thickness. Rays of different refrangibility produce distinct rings that vary widely according to the dimensions of the trapped space. When illuminated strictly by homogeneal light, the concentric patterns become sharper and multiply in their visible number. The specific rubrific rays create the widest and most expansive circles across the extremely thin plate of confined air. The changing diameters of the rings confirm that different refrangibility dictates the spatial distribution of the light. This profound phenomenon introduces the complex and mysterious concept known strictly as the fits of easy reflection. The direct observation reveals that a single corpuscular ray possesses a unique and periodic disposition to be reflected. Alternatively, the exact same ray may enter a different physical state, defined clearly as a fit of easy transmission. The disposition of the incoming ray to either reflect backward or pass entirely through the glass changes periodically. Careful calculation dictates that these distinct fits alternate at exactly 1/89,000th of an inch. This microscopic mathematical measurement introduces a profound and pulse-like nature to the corpuscular theory of light. The rigid and linear trajectory of the corpuscular emission is deeply complicated by this strange alternating rhythm. The structural properties of these thin plates of transparent matter dictate the exact manifestation of the bright rings. When water is deliberately substituted for air between the lenses, the physical diameter of every colored ring decreases. The increased density of the fluid medium within the thin plates alters the precise intervals of reflection and transmission. Regardless of the contained substance, the progression of circles obeys a strict and unyielding mathematical law. These periodic fits suggest the hidden presence of active principles operating invisibly at the boundaries of solid matter. The latent forces of attraction and mysterious fermentation govern the motion of these particles through the dense glass. The discovery of this strange periodic phenomenon represents a profound haunting of the previously rigid mechanical world. The undeniable observation of this rhythmic and periodic behavior fundamentally defies all simple and basic particle logic. The alternating sequence of light and darkness strongly hints at the existence of a much deeper and vibrating reality. This vibration operates independently of the human sensorium, existing as an objective property of the physical universe. The pure ray of sunlight is not merely a stream of inert matter, but a sequence of incredibly rapid and energetic pulses. Within the silent, darkened chamber, the isolated ray reveals its complex and highly structured internal rhythm. The immutability of individual colors is preserved, yet their transmission is entirely bound by this strict cadence. The physical length of each periodic fit is directly proportional to the specific degree of refrangibility of the given ray. As the thickness of trapped air increases from the center, the alternating fits overlap and synthesize new visual shades. A ray caught in a fit of easy reflection will bounce back, while a ray in a fit of easy transmission will pierce the glass. The interaction between these rapid pulses and the solid corpuscular boundaries creates an intricate and infinite puzzle. These concentric rings stand as a luminous ghost trapped entirely within the rigid physical structure of the heavy glass. The absolute immutability of the simple ray now coexists with a continuous and strict internal mechanism of rapid oscillation. The mechanical universe is revealed to be governed by a strange and invisible cadence that dictates the behavior of light. The true nature of the solitary ray is an absolute and eternal vibration of geometric force traversing the silent darkness. Chapter 5. The Edge of the Void. The boundary layer of solid matter forms a strict threshold where the straight path of the ray meets resistance. An absolute confrontation occurs when the pure trajectory of the light approaches the physical edge of an object. The factual exploration carefully examines the strange bending of light within the deep shadows of slender hairs. Light passing near the dark edge of a sharp steel knife is observed to bend outward and produce colored fringes. This peculiar inflection of the corpuscular stream occurs entirely without the transparent geometry of any prism. The shadows of simple metallic needles display unexpected bands of color that violently disrupt the dark boundaries. The vivid fringes of color multiply and curve rhythmically along the precise contour of the microscopic obstacle. Each distinct band of inflected light represents a specific degree of refrangibility torn from the simple white. The red-making particles are consistently cast outward at a significantly different angle than the violet blue. The dark edge itself functions as an invisible prism that actively pulls the fragile components of the beam apart. This undeniable visual phenomenon forces a profound re-evaluation of the supposed emptiness existing in the void. The silent vacuum surrounding the dense obstacle is completely saturated with hidden mechanical potentials. These unseen fields of influence dictate that the pure light must ultimately interact with all worldly matter. This fundamental bending behavior occurs precisely where the luminous stream grazes the extreme edge of the matter. The strict observation that light travels in straight lines and creates sharp shadows rejects the wave hypothesis. The pure ray cannot be described as a simple mechanical pressure traveling through an invisible fluid medium. A simple fluid pressure would inherently fail to produce the incredibly sharp shadows consistently observed in the void. The hypothesis of light as a fluid medium completely crumbles before the rigid geometry of these observations. A simple wave cannot physically possess a diverse internal structure or distinct sides that dictate its travel. The illumination strictly maintains its linear trajectory until it comes into microscopic proximity with solid matter. A solitary beam entering the dense structure of the island crystal is abruptly split into two diverging streams. This unusual double refraction clearly reveals that individual rays possess distinct sides and specific orientations. The transparent Iceland spar fundamentally alters the internal architecture of the beam through this dual separation. A single incident ray is violently torn into two separate paths as it navigates the rigid lattice of the rare crystal. The emergence of two distinct rays from a single source proves that the original beam contains complex inner geometry. The distinct sides of the corpuscles dictate their precise mathematical routing through the crystalline environment. The strict separation within the Iceland spar confirms that these tiny elements are not uniform spherical drops. They possess a defined geometric polarity that strictly dictates their mechanical reaction to the crystal matrix. Light corpuscles actively interact with the hidden active principles of solid matter across microscopic distances. These traveling particles are powerfully attracted or repulsed by the invisible forces of the bodies they bypass. The physical edge of the knife exerts a profound gravitational influence upon the passing stream of luminous matter. The dense structure of the metallic needle is surrounded by an invisible aura of intense gravitational distortion. As the corpuscular stream penetrates this distorted zone, its mathematical path is immediately violently altered. The specific orientation of the individual particles determines the precise angle of their resulting deflection. The latent forces of attraction and repulsion dictate the precise degree of inflection observed near the sharp edges. The particles of light do not need to physically strike the obstacle to be completely turned out of their original way. The unseen active principles reach out from the solid material and dynamically alter the trajectory of the pure beam. The boundary layer serves as a volatile theater where the silent war between moving light and static matter is waged. This interaction proves that light is absolutely not a passive entity, but a stream of incredibly dynamic particles. The inescapable conclusion dictates that illumination is comprised of isolated particles traversing the vacuum. The conclusive realization marks a fundamental shift from simple physical optics to the realm of universal physics. The beam is not merely a visual phenomenon, but a persistent stream of heavy particles moving through the vast void. These luminous particles are strictly governed by the exact same forces of attraction that propel massive planets. Chapter 6. The Eternal Query. The physical boundary of the darkened chamber dissolves into the vast vacuum of the infinite silent space. The walls of the room fall away, leaving the solitary beam of light suspended within an endless expanse of absolute, unresisting darkness. Microscopic corpuscles of illumination project forward without obstruction, charting a perfectly straight trajectory across the cosmic void. The finite geometry of the glass prism now gives way to a grander scale, where optical mechanics dictate the movements of celestial bodies. This is the territory of the ultimate queries, where the rigorous method of analysis confronts the absolute limit of measurable phenomena. Dense matter and shifting light undergo a continuous exchange, proving that gross bodies and luminous rays are convertible into one another. Active principles operate silently in the background, serving as latent forces of attraction that govern the steady motion of all particles. The nature of fire itself is questioned through this rigid lens, proposing that heat and illumination stem from intense, violent agitation. A subtle and invisible aether pervades the intervening distances, providing a dense medium for the transfer of energy across the universe. This universal framework operates continuously without friction, preserving the original motion of every corpuscle with flawless precision. The rigorous method of analysis remains the singular path to truth, demanding that physical experiments must always precede any hypothesis. Unanswered questions are deliberately left suspended in the darkness, forming a legacy of deep interrogation that invites future discovery. The universe reveals itself as an infinitely complex machine, maintained in perfect equilibrium by those unyielding and active principles. This mechanical architecture exists entirely within the sensorium of God, the infinite space where the divine perceives all things directly. Intimate and immediate perception binds the cosmic structure together, uniting the microscopic ray of light with the endless void of space. Each colored corpuscle travels through this divine sensorium, reacting to the surrounding bodies without ever losing its absolute identity. Observation yields to profound contemplation as the borders of the prism expand to encompass the grand mechanism of planetary gravitation. The nature of a vacuum becomes a subject of intense scrutiny, questioning whether empty space is truly devoid of matter and physical force. If gross bodies can emit luminous particles, then the eternal conversion of physical mass into radiant energy remains a strong possibility. Light interacts with the boundaries of opaque objects, confirming that inflection is caused by unseen attractive and repulsive influences. The science of optics transitions into the philosophy of nature, merging the mathematics of the ray with the harmonious design of reality. There are no final answers presented here, only an ongoing interrogation of the physical laws that guide the eternal behavior of the cosmos. Experiments dissect the complexities of light, ensuring that the empirical method of analysis anchors every single theoretical proposition. Hypotheses must wait until the solid facts have been established, preventing the imagination from corrupting the purity of the observation. Unseen active principles govern the fermentation of particles, maintaining the structural integrity of both luminous and opaque substances. These latent forces dictate the constant attraction between bodies, pulling elements together across the expanse of the divine sensorium. The deliberate ambiguity of this final inquiry acknowledges that human understanding is an imperfect work, destined to remain forever open. Scientific truth stands as an ongoing process of rigorous interrogation, continually expanding to map the hidden laws of the broad universe. The isolated beam of light gives way to the infinite combinations of matter and energy that structure the eternal fabric of existence itself. Refrangibility and reflection become universal constants, mirroring the mathematical immutability found in the architecture of the cosmos. The solitary ray transforms into an archetype for all physical phenomena, carrying the unyielding truth of its internal composition outward. These queries provoke an ongoing quest, challenging future minds to measure the unseen forces that dictate the paths of all celestial spheres. Each answered question always spawns another, proving that the boundary of knowledge expands continuously along with the limits of space. There is no finality in the observation of the ray, only absolute certainty that physical laws remain universally consistent and unbroken. The legacy of this experiment is a universe stripped of its mystical illusions, leaving behind the stark beauty of pure, mechanical geometry. All observable phenomena ultimately surrender to the cold reality of these immutable laws, cementing the permanent architecture of light. This vast machine of the cosmos requires no outside guidance, functioning flawlessly through the innate, active principles of its own design. The final understanding reveals that the universe is constructed upon a foundation of eternal mathematics, indifferent to human thought. The universe is a vast machine maintained by active principles within the sensorium of God, functioning eternally with absolute precision.